Hello, and welcome to English Through Stories, the channel where you can listen to engaging episodes, enjoy a variety of topics, and improve English fluency. Each one repeats useful grammar, phrases, and vocabulary in context, so you can start to remember them naturally and use them yourself.
Welcome to part 2 of Colonel Sanders' KFC success story. In part 1, we learned how young Harlan Sanders lost his father, took on cooking duties at just 5 years old, and built resilience through hardship. As he grew, he drifted through jobs: farmer, soldier, ferryman, even lawyer. But nothing seemed to last. His marriage collapsed, yet one constant remained: his love of cooking. By the 1930s, he was running a gas station in Kentucky, where his fried chicken began drawing crowds and gave him his first real success. Now let's continue the story. Scene 4. The service station and the first customers, 1930s. By the time Harlan reached his early 40s, he had tasted failure so many times it almost felt routine. Yet the country itself was changing. Automobiles were everywhere. Highways were stretching across Kentucky, and travelers needed places to stop for fuel. In 1930, Harlan spotted a chance for opportunity. He took over a Shell service station in Corbin, Kentucky. At first, the work was plain. He was pumping gas, was checking oil, and was fixing tires. The station smelled of grease and gasoline, and trucks were rumbling along the road day and night. Many men would have been content with steady wages, but Harlan was restless. He wanted more than a paycheck. He wanted independence, a business he could call his own. So he did something unusual. While competitors focused only on fuel, Harlan was setting up a small kitchen inside the station. He was cooking beans, ham, and biscuits, and soon he was frying chicken in a heavy skillet. The aroma drifted out toward the road, curling around the noses of travelers. Truck drivers began stopping not only for gasoline, but also for food. Word spread quickly. By the mid-1930s, families driving along Route 25 were talking about the gas station with fried chicken. Newspapers even published small stories about it. Sanders Cafe was born. Harlan wore an apron, wiped his hands on a rag, and greeted customers like guests at his own table. If someone praised his cooking, he would smile and say, "I've been cooking since I was a boy. It's the only thing I've trusted myself to do right, but success never came without struggle." The Great Depression left families with little money. Harlan was adapting, offering affordable meals and sometimes feeding people on credit. He displayed resourcefulness that matched the times. Customers noticed his generosity and kept coming back. Trouble, however, also arrived in the form of competition. Across the road, another service station opened, and tension grew between the two businesses. One afternoon, the rivalry turned violent. Shots were fired. In the chaos, one of Harlan's employees was killed. The incident shocked the town, but Sanders refused to back down. The very next morning, he was repainting his sign and was greeting customers again. His fortitude impressed people who saw him as stubborn, yes, but also unbreakable. The cafe grew busier. Harlan was experimenting with different sides and meals, always trying to improve. He expanded the cafe next to the station, hiring waitresses and keeping long hours. His reputation as a cook began to spread beyond Corbin. Truckers told stories of the man at the gas station who served hot, tasty meals with a firm handshake. Life in the cafe was demanding. Harlan often was working from early morning until late at night. Waitresses were carrying trays piled with plates. Truckers were swapping stories in booths, and children were licking their fingers after eating fried chicken. The small building buzzed with life, and Harlan, though tired, felt proud. For the first time, his ambition was not slipping away. Even so, the cafe demanded constant vigilance. If food quality dipped, he corrected it. If a waitress was slow, he scolded her. His temper still flashed, but now it was matched by purpose. He was no longer drifting, he was building. Each plate of chicken was not just a meal, it was a brick in the foundation of something larger. At night, after the last customers left, Harland often sat alone in the cafe, wiping down counters and listening to the faint hum of cars on the highway. He thought of his children, now far away, and of Josephine, long gone. He wondered if they would ever know how hard he was trying to make something last. The cafe gave him pride, but it also gave him a deeper longing to create food that people would remember. Scene 5. The Recipe of a Lifetime, late 1930s to 1940s. By the late 1930s, Sanders Cafe had become a busy stop for travelers on U.S. Route 25. Cars were rolling into the lot each day, and truckers were parking their rigs outside, eager for a hot meal. Inside, the cafe smelled of coffee, biscuits, and frying meat. Families sat at wooden tables, children were laughing, and travelers were resting before the next long drive. Harland was finally earning a reputation that gave him pride, but he was not satisfied. Fried chicken had been part of his menu since the beginning, but he wanted it to be more than ordinary. Ordinary was what other cooks offered. He wanted his chicken to be unforgettable, to carry his name beyond Kentucky. So every night after closing, while the cafe was quiet, Harland was experimenting in the kitchen. He was mixing spices in bowls, was scribbling notes on scraps of paper, and was tasting batch after batch of chicken. His dedication became almost an obsession. He tried paprika, then thyme, then mustard powder. He adjusted the balance of salt and pepper, adding one spice too heavily, then too lightly. Sometimes the chicken came out bland, sometimes too sharp. But he refused to give up. Neighbors sometimes walked past the cafe late at night and saw the kitchen light still glowing. Inside, Harland was frying another round of chicken, his brow damp with sweat, his pencil scratching notes. After months of trial and error, he found it, the perfect blend. 11 herbs and spices. The taste was rich, balanced, and unlike anything else. The secret recipe became his most valuable possession. He guarded it fiercely, telling no one the exact mix. Even decades later, it remained a mystery that kept people guessing. For Harland, it was not just a recipe. It was proof that perseverance could turn trial into triumph. Yet another problem nagged at him. Cooking fried chicken in a skillet took too long. Travelers didn't want to sit for half an hour waiting for food. Truck drivers especially grew restless. Some nights he watched customers leave before the chicken was ready, and it frustrated him deeply. His chicken tasted wonderful, but speed mattered. He needed a way to cook faster without losing flavor. In the early 1940s, Harland heard about a new invention, the pressure cooker. It was designed for vegetables, not meat, but he saw potential. He bought one, carried it into the cafe kitchen, and began experimenting. At first, the results were poor. The timing was wrong. The chicken came out soggy. He kept adjusting. Sometimes steam hissed violently from the pot, and he feared it might explode. More than once, he nearly burned himself. Still, he persisted. Night after night, Harland was testing cooking times, was adjusting temperatures, and was risking failure. His employees thought he was crazy. "Colonel, why don't you just fry it the way you always have?" they asked. He shook his head. "No, it can be better. It must be better." His innovation was driving him forward. Finally, after weeks of dangerous trial and error, he mastered it. Pressure-fried chicken came out golden, crispy, and juicy. And most importantly, it cooked in a fraction of the time. A meal that once took 30 minutes could be ready in 15. Customers were marveling at how quickly they received their food, and the taste was extraordinary. Word spread quickly, and soon travelers were detouring just to try Sanders' chicken. With the secret recipe and the pressure fryer together, Harland had created something revolutionary. It was no longer just good cooking, it was an experience. His cafe became famous across Kentucky. Drivers told each other, "If you pass through Corbin, stop for the Colonel's chicken. It's worth the trip." Even during World War II, when supplies were scarce and money was tight, he refused to compromise. He was substituting when he had to, but he never abandoned his standards. He believed that integrity in cooking mattered more than profit. Customers trusted him, and that trust kept his cafe alive even in lean times. At night, when the cafe finally emptied, Harlan sometimes stood at the doorway, wiping his hands on his apron and gazing at the line of cars pulling away. He knew he had found something powerful. He had transformed childhood necessity into a craft, and a craft into an innovation. Still, he didn't know how far it would take him. Micro turning point: the creation of the secret recipe and the invention of pressure-fried chicken turned Sanders' cooking from ordinary to legendary, laying the foundation for a global empire. Let's pause for more practice with the past continuous. This is a good moment to build confidence. Each morning he was polishing his shoes and was rehearsing speeches. At night, Josephine was soothing crying babies while Harland was reading booklets. Harland often was disappearing into new schemes, only to return frustrated. That's 9 total sentences. Your fluency is growing. Keyword: perseverance. Perseverance means not giving up, even when you face many problems. Scene 6. The road moves and the cafe falls, 1950s. By the early 1950s, Sanders' Cafe was thriving. Cars were pulling into the gravel lot every evening. Families were crowding into booths, and waitresses were carrying trays piled high with golden chicken. The kitchen clattered with pans. The air smelled of herbs and oil, and Harlan felt a pride he had rarely known. After decades of drifting and losing, he believed he finally had stability. But life, as always, was unpredictable. In 1955, Harlan learned that the government planned to build a new interstate highway. The road, designed to speed travelers through Kentucky, would bypass Corbin entirely. At first, Harlan dismissed the news. "People know where to find me," he said. But soon, road crews arrived. Bulldozers were cutting paths through hillsides, and surveyors were mapping routes that left his cafe in the shadows. Within months, the change became clear. Cars that once filled his lot were disappearing. Families who had once made detours for his chicken now sped along the wide interstate, their tires humming on fresh concrete. Each week, fewer customers came. Each month, receipts shrank. The cafe that had been buzzing with life was falling silent. Harland was watching it happen with a heavy heart. He was standing at the window some evenings, was counting the cars that passed without stopping. He tried promotions, he cut costs, he worked harder than ever. But nothing could replace the steady stream of travelers who were now bypassing Corbin. The collapse was painful. He had poured years into the cafe. He had built his reputation from that kitchen. Now it was crumbling. At age 65, when most men dreamed of rest, Harlan faced ruin. He sold the cafe, paid his debts, and found himself with little more than his old Cadillac, a few $100s, and his recipe. For a time, despair threatened him. Nights alone in motel rooms, he was staring at the ceiling, was wondering if his life's work had ended in failure. But deep inside, his tenacity refused to surrender. If customers would not come to him, he would go to them. So Harlan packed bags of flour and seasoning into the trunk of his car. With the secret recipe as his most valuable possession, he set out on the road once more. He was driving from town to town, pulling into restaurant parking lots and walking in with sleeves rolled up. Inside, he pitched his idea. He would teach owners how to pressure fry chicken with his method. In return, he asked for a small payment for every chicken sold. Most owners shook their heads. Some laughed. Others told him it was too risky. Harland, embarrassed but stubborn, was sleeping in his car when money was short, was eating crackers or canned beans to survive. The rejections piled up, hundreds of them, but every no only hardened his perseverance. He believed his chicken was too good to be ignored. Somewhere someone would say yes. And finally, someone did. A small restaurant agreed to try his chicken. Customers loved it. Word spread. Another restaurant signed on, then another. The idea of franchising, unknown to Harland when he started, was born. Still, the road was lonely. Nights in cheap motels tested his resolve. Days of long driving across states wore him down. Yet he pressed forward. At an age when most men slowed down, he was beginning again, carrying only a recipe and a relentless faith in himself. Looking back years later, Harland admitted that losing the cafe was both the worst defeat and the greatest blessing of his life. Without it, he might never have taken his recipe on the road. Failure, once again, had forced him into a new invention. Micro turning point. The cafe's fall could have ended his story, but instead it pushed him to invent franchising at 65, turning personal ruin into the seed of a worldwide empire. Scene 7. The birth of a franchise, 1950s to 1960s. By the mid-1950s, Harland was no longer a cafe owner in Corbin, Kentucky. Instead, he was a gray-haired man in a white Cadillac, was driving thousands of miles with bags of flour, seasoning, and a pressure fryer in his trunk. At gas stations, he was refilling the tank. At roadside diners, he was stopping to pitch his chicken. And at night, he was sleeping in the back seat when motels cost too much. Each morning, he was waking with stiff joints, but also with the same perseverance to keep going. Rejections still came. Some weeks he was walking into 5 or 6 restaurants a day, only to leave shaking his head. Owners told him fried chicken was already on their menus, or that his royalty fee was too high, or that his method was too complicated. Harland was nodding, was thanking them, then was driving to the next town. His persistence, even in the face of humiliation, impressed a few owners who admitted later they had underestimated him. Finally, in 1952, a turning point arrived. Pete Harmon, a restaurant owner in Salt Lake City, listened carefully to Sanders' pitch. Harland was demonstrating his method right there in Harmon's kitchen, was coating chicken in flour and seasoning, was lowering it into the pressure fryer, and was serving the golden pieces minutes later. Customers loved it. Harmon was impressed, not only by the flavor, but also by the speed and consistency. He agreed to sign the first official franchise deal. It was Harmon who suggested the name Kentucky Fried Chicken. The phrase carried a sense of place, tradition, and authenticity. Harland liked it immediately. Soon the words were appearing on menus, and customers were recognizing the brand. Kentucky Fried Chicken was no longer just one man's cooking. It was becoming a national identity. The deal with Harmon was only the beginning. Harland was traveling from state to state, walking into kitchens with the confidence of someone who had nothing left to lose. He was cooking side by side with owners, was teaching them his method, and was inspecting every detail. He demanded consistency. It must taste the same every time, everywhere, he insisted. If the flour was wrong, he corrected it. If the chicken was undercooked, he scolded the cook. His integrity mattered more than politeness. By the late 1950s, more restaurants signed on. The network grew slowly at first, then rapidly. Families were eating Kentucky Fried Chicken in roadside diners across the Midwest and South. Truckers were telling each other about it. Newspapers were publishing features on the unusual old man in a white suit who traveled with a pressure fryer in his car. That white suit and black string tie became Harland's trademark. He had received the honorary title of Kentucky Colonel years earlier, and now he leaned into it fully. He was dressing in white linen, was growing a neat goatee, and was presenting himself as a Southern gentleman. Children waved when they saw him. Adults respected him. The image was part costume, part truth, but it gave the brand a face. Kentucky Fried Chicken was not just a product, it was a person. By 1964, fewer than 10 years after he sold his cafe in defeat, there were more than 600 Kentucky Fried Chicken franchises. Harland, now in his 70s, had transformed from a man rejected by hundreds of restaurants to the head of a booming national chain. Still, the work exhausted him. Managing contracts, training franchisees, and maintaining quality demanded more than one man could give. That year, he made another bold decision. He sold his interest in the company for $2 million to a group of investors. Some said he was quitting, but Harlan never retired. Instead, he became the face of the brand, traveling constantly, was shaking hands with customers, was smiling for photographs, and was promoting Kentucky Fried Chicken wherever he went. His ambition had finally crystallized, not in one cafe, but in a franchise system that stretched across the United States. Micro turning point: the deal with Pete Harmon and the creation of Kentucky Fried Chicken transformed Harland from a struggling salesman into the Colonel, a living symbol of resilience and innovation, whose image and recipe now reached every corner of the country. Let's pause again for a short fluency drill. This is a great practice moment. He was demonstrating his method in Harmon's kitchen. Harland was coating chicken in flour, was lowering it into the fryer, and was serving golden pieces. He was dressing in white linen and was presenting himself as a Southern gentleman. That's 21 total sentences. You're building strong habits. Keyword: persistence. Persistence means continuing to try, even when others reject you. Scene 8. Legacy across the world. 1960s to 1980s. By the mid-1960s, Kentucky Fried Chicken had outgrown the highways of America. The red and white bucket with the smiling face of the Colonel was appearing in cities far from Kentucky. Families were recognizing the name, children were pointing at his image, and travelers were searching for his restaurants along new roads. What had begun in a small cafe in Corbin was turning into a global story. Even after selling the company in 1964, Harlan Sanders refused to slow down. At an age when most men were retiring, he was traveling more than ever. He boarded planes, rode trains, and drove long stretches of road. Each year, he was covering more than 200,000 miles, often was visiting 2 or 3 restaurants in a single day. Everywhere he went, he wore his crisp white suit and black string tie. The outfit had become his armor and his emblem. People were seeing him not just as a businessman, but as a symbol of authenticity. In the United States, new franchises were opening every week. In Canada, diners were lining up to try the famous chicken. In England, Londoners were tasting fried chicken for the first time as a fast food dish. And in Mexico, customers were embracing it with enthusiasm. In Japan, the success was almost magical. Clever marketing connected Kentucky Fried Chicken with Christmas. And soon Japanese families were celebrating the holiday with buckets of fried chicken, a tradition that continues even today. Harland himself often reflected on how far he had come. As he sat in airports or hotel lobbies, he sometimes thought back to the boy in Indiana who was stirring pots out of necessity, the young man who was failing in law, the middle-aged cafe owner who was watching his business collapse under a new highway. Those struggles had not destroyed him. Instead, they had prepared him. His resilience had turned each setback into a stepping stone. But Harland never lost his plain-spoken honesty. If he walked into a franchise and found the chicken below his standards, he didn't hesitate. He was scolding managers, sometimes with colorful language that startled employees. His integrity mattered more than politeness. "This food represents my name," he reminded them. "It must be right." For Sanders, quality and trust were worth more than profit. By the 1970s, KFC had grown into one of the largest restaurant chains in the world. Harlan's face was recognized in dozens of countries. He appeared in television commercials, smiling warmly as if welcoming viewers to his table. Unlike other brands that used mascots or actors, KFC used the real man. The Colonel was not a character, he was himself. This gave the company a powerful sense of authenticity. Customers believed in the story because it was true. Even in his 80s, Harland refused to slow down. Reporters often described him as tireless. He was shaking hands with children, was posing for photos with families, was telling jokes to franchise owners. His presence gave KFC a human heart. To see him in a restaurant was to see living proof that perseverance could carry someone from poverty to worldwide fame. In 1980, at the age of 90, Colonel Harlan Sanders passed away. His funeral in Louisville, Kentucky drew thousands. Governors, business leaders, and ordinary citizens came to honor him. That same day, more than 6,000 KFC outlets around the world were serving his recipe. Each bucket of chicken was not only a meal but also a piece of his story. Today, decades later, his face still smiles from signs in more than 150 countries. The story of Colonel Sanders is not just about food, it is about never giving up, no matter how late in life success arrives. His legacy shows that tenacity, fortitude, and hope can turn even the darkest setbacks into triumphs.